everybody and welcome back to a new video. Today we are building a sort of fantasy-esque style house that has mushrooms sort of growing around it and in almost through it. I was really inspired to make this build because of a recent trip I had where I got to see a lot of mushrooms and just like the wet wilderness, which is really interesting because when you live in a place that is typically so dry, seeing how wet places can be is really eye-opening. So I had this idea of having like a sort of fantasy style house, just like being surrounded by mushrooms that have just grown up over time. And so I built like a typical sort of fantasy L-shaped house. I used some blocks that I wouldn't usually use, and I'm not really sure about the color palette. It was like beigey cream for like the walls, which I'm not sold on 100%, but I think that it looks good in the end. But it's sort of something that I would never use, and I would never really think of using like for any particular build, but I was sort of just like, why not? I think that it might clash a little too much with the crimson planks from the roof, but I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I'm also not 100% sold on the gradient. I think they're better for bigger builds or like clearer things rather than a lower story and a top story. I don't know. It was a lot of experimentation with the color palettes. And then mushrooms, organic builds. I have a love-hate relationship with these. Usually what I do is I sort of like just figure out where the bottom is and like draw like a sort of lopsided circle and then trial and error it until it looks good, which is what I did here. It's what I've done before. If you haven't seen the last video where I made a mushroom, that was actually quite a while ago, but that was my first like really big mushroom that I ever made, and I'm very proud of it. And then for like the head of the mushroom, what I tend to do is I tend to like mark it out with dirt. So I sort of create, or not a wireframe, I suppose it is a wireframe. I create sort of like a wireframe, and then on the bottom to figure out where like it sits on top of the stem, and then I build it up to the center from the very edges, from the 4 points at the edges. I build that up to the center and the top of it, and then I fill in the gaps in between using just trial and error, just placing things where they look good. What's really hard about making mushrooms is having the right sort of slope, because if it's too tall, your mushroom looks kind of weird, but if it's like too short, like it also looks weird. So you have to find like a balance between having a steep slope and also having something that looks rounded as opposed to like conical. And I suppose I could have also done this using like red wool or another red block, but I think that this is like the most vibrant, and I think that I don't know, it just gives the mushroom vibes. I don't think that the white is too over the top for it. The white dots, I don't think that they're too over the top. But yeah, making organic builds is very time consuming, so I don't do it very often. But I do enjoy it when I do end up doing it. And then I sort of like decided to like do some landscaping, and I put in some like coarse dirt around the house because it looks wet. I feel like it does look quite wet, but also it just adds a little bit of texture to the ground, and it feels like mushrooms would grow more on coarse dirt than actually on grass, so I think that it fit. I also added some smaller mushrooms around, like smaller ones that I made, and just normal mushrooms, the little mushroom blocks. Just to show that they are still growing and there are more coming, rather than just having two big ones. And then to contrast with the red one, I made a brown one because those are the two typical types of mushrooms that you see. This one, the stem of this was really annoying because I wanted it to be like tall and skinny, but it like ended up quite rectangular and I didn't like that. But I got there in the end. I think it looked alright. I prefer the red one. They're easier to make. But this one, like the top was a bit weird. It's a bit of a weird shape. But I sort of tackled that by making some circular-ish shapes. And then going down like 3 layers, just making some bigger and bigger circles that weren't quite perfect. I should have done the underneath of it, like the underside, and made it more accurate, I think. But I just didn't. I couldn't be bothered once I'd finished it. I was like, this is too much organic building for me. But I think it looks okay regardless. And then I just added a little bit of rooted dirt. I think that it's like a cool block, but I just don't find a lot of places to use a lot of it. But I added it a little bit around, and then I did some more landscaping just to finish everything off. And here's the final build. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you very soon for another video.